Okay, so we are back with our time from, let's go to Let's Chat, A Way Out. So we'll take chat thoughts and opinions for what they saw of it. We definitely had some rough connection issues. Some of that is just distance between players. I think next time we'll probably end up hosting over Calvitium only because we have a serious computer for it. So it'll probably handle it a little better. And then I'm thinking also next time we go to play, it might help if I connect them into a VPN to see if that helps with some of the connection, like the long distance issues. There's always going to be a bit of lag and latency when you're playing co-op. That's not something I'm necessarily going to point the finger at with the game itself, but I just want to be clear when we're talking about it and I'm acknowledging it. So let's give a high level premise of the game. So the game is meant to be short. It's meant to be played 2 players. In fact, it's not able to be played in single player, where we took the role of one of 2 potentially criminal characters, and we go through a lot of what I'll call action scenes or action sets. It could involve things like breaking out of prison, driving getaway boats, motorcycle chases, parachuting potentially. And throughout, we were given options to follow one of the 2 characters' methods, one being more crude and a bit more violent, the other being more stealthy and persuasive. So there's definitely some replayability options with the game itself. It looks like it'll take about like maybe 2 sessions to sit through, unless somebody's willing to dedicate that like 8 to 10 hour potential period. So I'm not saying you can't beat it in a day, but if you're going through all the dialogue and you're not skipping anything and you're trying some of the side games, it's not very likely you'll finish it in one sitting. So overall thoughts towards it, I think for the price, it was okay. So basically, when you buy the game, the intent is that it gives you a free copy to play with another player. So it might look a little expensive, but it's kind of like you're paying for 2 copies, one for you, one for the friend, which is an interesting model with it, especially if you're looking to introduce people to the game. The connection itself was a little shaky, but again, some of that's more on the technical side. So we'll try again maybe with one of the other games in the series. It was very predictably cheesy, but that doesn't make it like necessarily a bad time. And of course, whenever you play with a friend, there's always the bias that the game overall is still decently fun. I will say it had a lot of variety in it. I'm not usually a big fan of stealth mechanics, but the stealth sections were okay. As I said before, you're doing a lot of potentially, piloting of vehicles or other things in this third-person style shift. I like the kind of pool where if you're walking around and somebody's having a conversation, it'll make them bigger in the split screen, so that way the other person could kind of watch as like a cinematic a bit more. Or if like one person is guiding the main story, then it would potentially fade the other person away to focus, so that way both players are watching a very specific story sequence. And I kind of like that push and pull between the 2 players, depending on who's doing something slightly more important. That way viewers watching or even people playing can understand like, oh, something important's happening, I better take a look. It gives you some mechanics to kind of like run around, do basic action rolls, or potentially look for objectives. And I think the movement in it was okay. I'm not sure I was a big fan of the story, so I'm trying to think of, before we go into spoilers, like full-blown spoilers, how to frame it. I would say the pacing of the story was very odd, in particular in the beginning, where it does a lot of things where it shifts between 2 different points of time, and it kind of glosses over some things that don't really seem like they should connect. I think there was a couple points we were watching, not in this particular last session, but in the first session, where we're like, wait, what? We got away with that? How? Like, we just audibly said that as we played the game, where it just felt like there should have been another scene, or the lead-in was a bit odd. And we even did a double take and went back and rewatched just to make sure we didn't skip anything by accident. And like, nope, that's just how it flowed between 2 story elements. That was a bit of a strange choice. I think the characters themselves were unique enough. I'm not going to call them compelling. It tried to give you reasons to care about them. It sets up some of the backstory, some of the family, and it slowly goes through their motives, either through flashbacks or through action sequences. And I think the character personality slowly comes out as you go through these different things. Like, even with how you interact with people that are not related to the plot, like talking to people in a waiting room, or trying to handle like a negotiation, or trying to get gas for vehicles and such like that, where you're just put in a scenario the dialogue that they have specific to those characters and the reactions to it, I think definitely drive the game forward from that sense. So I'll say the game is decent. Would I play it end to end again? Maybe not. It wasn't like it was a decent game. I had fun because I was with a friend, and that's the selling point. If you want to find something to potentially play with a friend, it's not bad. I think there are parts of it that are good, some parts that were a little slow. Yeah, we saw some weird elements, in particular with some of the stealth segments, where they seem to just have like eyes in the back of their head, literally, where they were nowhere near the person, and then they would just kind of zip to them. Those were definitely the lower points of the game overall, but it had a lot of different mini games, competitive and co-op, throughout, either through story or through side things you could pick up, which I think were fine. And as I said before, it has a decent variety, so it's not just walking around for the most part. You're doing a lot of things or trying to do a lot of timings, which doesn't necessarily lend itself well to an online environment, but take that as you will, I suppose. So I think we're going to move more into the spoiler territory side of things. So for people just listening for the final thoughts there, I would recommend that you don't listen to what we're about to talk about. So I think it was pretty obvious when we were going through the game itself that one of the characters was very obviously a cop. Like, maybe not in the first couple of scenes that they were in, but easily before the halfway mark, it led itself to be extraordinarily suspicious, where it would not flash back to the other character when one of the characters that clearly was trying to take the diamond was having all this exposition, and the other guy is like, oh yeah, I want it for this reason, and then no flashback occurs. So it kind of outs itself, sadly. So for me, the hook didn't really work as like a surprise angle. So we were all just kind of joking about it by like the last 2-3 hours of the game collectively, since it set itself up to do those kinds of things. When it comes to the other portions of the game, definitely a bit awkward trying to fine-tune the third-person shooter elements. They were okay. They at least were not hard, but definitely very awkward with like the default sensitivity. Like, it was like a difference of like, it was 4 times easier to go left and right than up and down, which is a little rough when you're trying to do like multi-level shooting between, you know, either a warehouse or like out in Mexico in the guy's manor house or whatever. Some of the optional deaths you could see are funny, some are disappointing, so it's kind of a mixed bag there. The parachute one was disappointing. The cutaway was very disappointing. There's a couple of scenes where if you try to fail it on purpose, it won't really let you. Like, for example, when I was purposely not grabbing the hand of someone, it just waited patiently for me to do it. Yeah, it set up the end. Even the ending was extraordinarily cliched, but as I said before, that doesn't necessarily make the game bad. But like, when I'm sitting there and I'm saying like, oh, let me guess, we're gonna have a betrayal in the rain at night, and the person will want the diamond as the way out, and it was like almost exactly what happened, and I declared that in like the first couple hours of the game, shows that they don't necessarily do new things with it. If you've seen things, or if you're kind of like looking to like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if, more often than not, you're probably going to get all the plot points on the nose. They even have the cliche, the villain is so evil, so he shoots the guy anyway. Like, they had basically every kind of trope stuffed into some of the secondary characters in particular. Yeah, actually, well, it's not a very long game, so there's not really much to talk about with spoilers. But I hope people enjoyed what they saw from what it was. I mostly had fun. I will say, with some of the lag, it was like literally impossible to do some of the mini games. Like, I had to see very far in the future, so the lag can be an issue. In particular, when it was like the climatic sequence of player versus player, and it's like, oh, I literally can't do anything because the other person has no lag and I do. This is actually just unfair on many levels. So that experience, I feel, was kind of soured from those kinds of issues. And I don't necessarily even think that switching who hosted would have 100% resolved those. There's just an inherent, you know, bonus, we'll call it the handicap of being the non-host, when you go into those things. So it's always kind of a mixed bag when it makes it go to strictly competitive versus co-op, which a lot of the game initially focused on co-op, with competitive more being side games. But I think otherwise, yeah, it was fine for what it is. And I don't think I have really too much else to say about the game itself. So hopefully people saw at least a little bit of interest. It could, you know, burn maybe, as I said before, probably about 8 to 10 hours if you're going through the cutscenes and at least messing around with some of the mini games. If you're just straight doing plot, I would subtract a couple hours, because to be honest, like, we went and talked to like every NPC that we came across, and if we didn't do that, that was easily just like a half hour to 40 minutes on an otherwise pretty short playthrough. So with that, chat, I think we're going to conclude our final thoughts for the game there. And we're going to transition into a different game for the remainder of the night. But hopefully you enjoyed what you saw. But for now, chat, let's give a final goodbye to the people that were watching A Way Out. I almost said The Last of Us. But from that standpoint, thank you for watching, and hope to see you again in the next game.